This is your cell.
Si eres ladrillo, seré concreto. Si eres oreja, seré Van Gogh. Si eres...
فما كاري ابيض فما ريكتانجل ابيض فيرتيكال
تو دي تصور دي كيك
Ay Bennett.
Oder bleibt es Utopie? Jeder Mensch weiß, es ist ein Kreis, und immer verweilt, Elend und Leid, der Liege treibt, innerlich schreit, sich zerreißt.
I would also like to thank Frédéric, who made Critics Week possible in the past and will be our moderator in just a few minutes. Tonight, actually, there's of course a debate on two of our films again. The debate is called Talking Style, and while the team is disconnecting and we are bringing in our debate guests, I will just let you know a little bit about our idea behind it, which was as in many cases at Critics Week, to combine two films in a surprising way, because we hope they have to say something to each other. So the films have communicated already with each other, and our guests will become part of this conversation. And the two films we showed under this label were FREIZEIT, or The Opposite of Doing Nothing, by Caroline Pitzen, and which was, by the way, photographed or shot by Markus Koop, who is also the cinematographer of Julian Radelmeier, who had just a film in the Berlinale, a really fascinating work as well. And we showed it together with The Museum Sleeps by Camille Genet. And yeah, the films are still very present in my mind since we watched them again today. And I can't wait for the debate to start. Frédéric, thank you very much for being part of this and giving us the honor of moderating this. So the mic is yours and the floor is yours, or the screen is yours, rather.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm happy to have three guests in this virtual Zoom, and I'm probably gonna see them in a minute. Caroline Pitzen, Jennifer Rieder, and Rahel Jaeggi. Our topic of talking cinema, and in German Kunstsprache, is of course a very broad topic and something that is at the core of cinema, at the way we look at films. So to get into this topic of the question of whether there is a slang of cinema, whether there is some kind of way we express ourselves directly through images, whether there are maybe even dialects emerging as a reaction to the presence in cinema, and what constitutes a visual style. These are questions that we want to talk about. And I think one aspect of style is the question of methods, of methodologies of working with images. So I'd like to start with Caroline Pitzen, whose film we've seen, and ask a little bit about what style means for you as a method, in a relationship maybe to the film's protagonist and its sujet. What do we see actually in your film? How would you describe what we see in your film, who we follow, and how do we follow?
So yeah, our film is about a group of Berlin teenagers and how they spend their free time, their leisure time, their Freizeit. And style at the method. I think the first stylistic choice that I made with this project was to not work with the conventional script, but to develop the content of our film in collaboration with the group of teenagers, the 5 main actors of the film. So over the course of 3 months in 2017, we had weekly meetings, and they got exercises and questions and things from me that they took into their week. And then, we met after a week again and brought in the ideas and thoughts that they had gathered. And after these meetings, I always transferred what we had worked on in such a session. And it was mainly topics, situations, actions, places that came out. And then in the end, we had like a big mountain of material, and decided what of this material that we had worked on together, or like that we had created together, would become material for our film. Also, I mean, as there's a lot of material in the film as well, apart from the material that we created together, I have to mention that this Schernikau Kleinstadtnovelle was there from the very first beginning. And also the question that accompanied him while writing it, when he started to write this book when he was 17 years old in 1977. And a question was accompanying him. In German, it's called work in which we live, or what effect has what is surrounding us. And this was a starting point also for us, but also for me. I mean, like before I started to work with the teenagers, I reread Kleinstadtnovelle. So it was like the material that was always with us from the very first beginning on. And Coole Wampe.
In a way, you did FREIZEIT in their FREIZEIT. I mean, the film was made in the free time, whatever that means, of these young people while they're going to school, I guess.
Yeah.
So in between their daily life, or whatever the not free time is. Rahel, do you want to say something?
Yeah. I mean, I would be interested because I was so fascinated about the natural flow of the conversation and the way they interacted with each other. So have they been, I mean, besides from working the script out with them and working on it with their ideas, have they been a group of friends already when you met them? And have they been engaged in the kind of political activism that they are engaged in the movie? Or, I mean, how did you get to know them? How did you choose them? And how was their, have they been a group already, or did they somehow turn into a group while working with you?
Yeah, so actually they all knew each other before, but some were friends or are friends still, others were not. But I guess like everybody knew each other. And with one protagonist, I have like a very long relationship already because he's the son of a good friend. And I know him since he's 6. So yeah, I guess this was like also for the whole process of working together, a big confidence, trust that was already there, like between the two of us. But I mean, some of them did not really know each other that well before we started to shoot, but everybody had seen each other before, like at a party or whatever. And regarding the question of political activism, yeah, I mean, like all what is like the whole material of the film that we created comes from, I mean, like they know what they speak about, right? It's not made up. And this was very important for me because I wanted to make a film about political activism and political consciousness in the period of life called youth. And for me, it was very important to work with people who, also in their real lives have these thoughts and conversations and relating to each other in regard to certain topics.
So it's a relationship with something like documentary methods, I guess. I mean, partly in the research and in the way that you found these people, and that you want to convey something that was there before, that is not that is in a way formed through the process of filming, which is what every documentary film does as well. But you do transform it a little bit more into something that is not strictly speaking documentary, even though you use some of those methods. Maybe you can. I just thought watching this, there's very obviously a communication about the form. When you look at it, you see that there's something about it that goes beyond something that could be scripted, but at the same time, you see that it is made in, for example, the choice of long takes. Maybe you can talk a little bit about those choices that you made, how to film and how to edit.
Yeah, actually, Markus Koop, the cinematographer, and I, we decided to find images, frames, compositions that create a stage. And we wanted to put the conversations on the stage within the city environment, right? And so I guess this thought about the image and the framing of the image and the composition, that was also very important. And then the conversations were much longer actually than what is in the film now. So I guess like the shortest take was maybe like 20 minutes. I mean, of course, sometimes we repeated things or we changed the camera position, then it was maybe also shorter. But we always had like, for at least, for example, the establishing shot was always like minimum 20 minutes. Yeah, so it was a lot of material that I had to work on during the editing process.
Jennifer, you already unmuted yourself. I was going to ask you about your reactions to this film, also as a fellow filmmaker, because I know that filmmakers sometimes, not always, look at a film and see also how it's made and see something about the methods. How did you react first to the film, and what did it convey to you about the methods of stylistic approaches?
Well, first of all, it's really great to be part of this conversation. And I'm a big fan in all sorts of films of a long take. I really love a long take. I love slow cinema. I love being able to observe. And there's something that's, you know, I think what's really astonishing about your film, Carolina, is that its content is really about a kind of urgency. You know, these young people, like, we have to change the world and we're running out of time, you know. But your film is so like generous with its time. For instance, like the film itself, excuse me, there's not an urgency in the way that the information is presented. So being able to, you know, to maintain what feels like an urgency in the mission of the subject, of the performers, while having this very stylized framing, a very particular framing, a very particular pacing. Like combining those two things, where we understand that this was made by a filmmaker who is concerned with pacing, who is concerned with framing, who's concerned with light. I mean, all of these kind of beautiful, very much more aesthetic elements, but while presenting authentic arguments towards political agency. You know, it's a very interesting combination, right? And so I think that normally when we see, especially a documentary that has such concern towards aesthetics and pacing, it's perhaps the subject is not so much about a kind of political, you know, agency. And some of the shots, you know, the combination of these quiet, intimate moments between two people talking, and then some of the larger, these beautiful, you know, wide shots of that soccer field that night, or at the very near the beginning, there's the two people talking in the park, and then it just cuts to just like the shot of the park, you know, this big, beautiful shot of the park, and this sense of you know, a person sort of dwarfed by their environment, you know, and the combination of those long shots and then these much more intimate shots, and was really, I think that's such a hard, that's a very, very, it's a combination that can go bad quickly. And you did such a, you know, beautiful job of keeping all of a kind of an urgency and authenticity of the characters, while also presenting, you know, what feels like a very highly kind of curated film, I would say, you know, and just in what you chose to include in their conversations was a whole range, right? It was a whole range of both the, you know, the young women also, you know, talking about, you know, aspects of feminism and sexism, and even perhaps feminism and sexism within like a kind of anarchists movement, you know, or aspects of racism or classism within a kind of anarchists movement, or the, you know, I think it's when the two people are talking on the roof and they're talking about privilege, you know, I mean, it's small. And then that beautiful moment when the two girls are on the bench, and one of them is saying how hard it is to talk to her grandmother and her grandmother's friends about xenophobia or something, you know, I mean, and I just feel like you were able to present a very long range for one's relationship to politics, but also while creating this film that has like its own breath, you know, like has this really beautiful breath. And it was clear, this is the last thing I'll say, it was clear that you had entry into this world, you know, that those people, they trust you, they trust your camera, but we weren't so inside the action that we could just say, well, this is all just coming from the inside, you know, that there was trust, but there was also this very, a kind of intellectual observation that I think was really, really astonishing.
Rahel, I saw you take notes. So of course I'm curious to your reactions to both what has been said and to the film, and what does it communicate to you in the grammar or in the language of that it uses. Yeah, how do you react?
I have to say, I totally agree with Jennifer about like the duration and the use that Caroline takes of time. And I think it's interesting, I mean, on the formal level, but also on the level of what the film is about, because there's this urgency, but at the same time, they take their time to sort out everything. And since they have to sort out everything, they have to sort out politics, they have to sort out the question, not only the Schernikov question, wie wirkt, worin wir leben, meaning how does society, how does the world we live in affect us as individuals, and the other way around. I mean, as Jennifer said, it's about political agency. So it's not only how does the world affect us, it's also about how can we be effective in the world? How can we sort out how to be agents, reflective agents in this world? How can we change the world? And And I think it's a beautiful way to look at them. I mean, this is also about the title, Freizeit, leisure time, and the opposite of doing nothing. So they are always busy in some way, and on the other hand, they are always, have this luxury of reflecting about everything and accompanying each other while figuring out how to make sense of the world. And I think Jennifer did a great job. I mean, showing us how this works through the pictures, through the forms, through the kind of it's also a very quiet movie. It's so interesting because it's in the midst of this more or less busy neighborhood, busy city. It's in the midst of activism, of marches, of rallies, of preparing for those, of having to make choices and so on. And at the same time, it's so quiet in a very special way. And this being quiet is not something that you just get from like documenting what they're doing and what happens. It's something that Caroline added to or somehow created through the way she did the movie, and she cut it and so on.
Well, for sure, those are choices, and maybe there's something even paradox or surprising, at least, about the fact what do we see from these people and what don't we see from them. I mean, they talk about situations that we never see. So there's this choice of only showing them talking about politics but never engaging in politics. So there's a very odd and strong choice in which material is being used. And Rahel, you just said that about the neighborhood. Do you know Friedrichshain? Were you able to
Let's
recognize?
look across the bridge. I mean, I live on the other side of Oberbaumbrücke, which is Kreuzberg, and of course I know Friedrichshain very well.
Did it feel like it was a film about Friedrichshain? What kind of impression did it make for you to have this film about Friedrichshain? What does it tell about this youth that identifies strongly with the neighborhood, at least in one scene?
It does and it does not. I mean, it's interesting. In some way it could be everywhere. And in some way it's not typical of, I mean, Caroline didn't choose the kind of pictures that you would usually connect with Friedrichshain. I mean, this area and the neighboring area. So it's not the typical kind of Berlin movie. I wouldn't say so. And there's also a lot of nature. I mean, all of these scenes where they are on park benches talking to each other. And this is something that is, I mean, talking about the luxury and the duration of the luxury of taking one's time to figure things out. I think it's about open spaces, Freizeit as open spaces, and also, I mean, part of the political activism and struggle is related to the creation of and defending this kind of free spaces, open spaces, spaces where you have this luxury, figuring out, reflecting upon how things are. And in some way, I mean, you said you never see them doing something. You never see there. I mean, you see, I mean, some police in one march in the background, but you see how they, I mean, how they are collecting points for, I don't know, their MVV meeting or something. But yes, you don't see them. You see them while they are like constantly talking, reflecting, talking it through. So it's like the Tonspur to a life of activism. Yeah,
Caroline,
it has created some kind of, I mean, there's so much realism in, or even, I mean, the documentaristic style, but at the same time, through some methods that Caroline will probably tell us a bit more about, she created this also to be in a space that is somehow unrelated. I mean, it's so related to everything, related to the NSU process. I mean, neo-fascism in Germany, related to gentrification, related to democracy in school, related to whatever. And at the same time, it's floating in an interesting way.
Yeah, Carolina, maybe going a little bit away about the methods of filming, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how political questions inform the way you build this film. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you briefly mentioned that before in terms of the conversations. I mean, this was also, of course, like somehow a political decision, right? To show conversations, and we hear a lot of things, but we don't see them. And with a lot of things, there's like very strong images through media in our heads. But of course, this was what I was not interested in, to reproduce these kind of images of an activist use. I was much more interested to like discover like thinking, reflecting, talking to each other, and observe this, and like have an uncut shot for like 6 minutes where people, or like where these teenagers are talking about a certain topic, right? And through the talking and through observing them while talking, images appear in each viewer, I guess. Yeah. And probably it's different images for everybody. It's a bit like going into the museum, like looking at an image, and everybody has or there are different perceptions of it, right? So, and this was, of course, like for me, somehow a political decision, because some things I don't want to show. You know, I don't want to make a film that shows I don't know, like for example, the scene when one of the actors tells her friend how it is to go home at night from a party. And I mean, of course, Jennifer, you do it quite well. But for me personally, I don't want to show that. You know, I don't want to reproduce that image that also is like in every crime series. Yeah. For me, it's much more intense to listen to it and let images appear in each of us.
I mean, there's something anti-dramatic or anti-climactic in your film, which is also quite short. I mean, you talked about the wealth of the material, but you come to a form that is very concentrated, and the relationships of the protagonists. I mean, contrary to let's say most of cinema, to not judge it, is built on conflicts between characters, and you decide not to. You decide to have these protagonists who are all in sync with each other almost the whole time, and the conflicts that are relayed are all conflicts that are outside of the image. I was wondering if this is almost. Is it a way for you also to convey that these protagonists are in a way secluded or protected?
I mean, of course, I think like in this field of left-wing political activism, there's like a lot of images that people have, right? And of course, maybe it was also connected to protection, but yeah, I think it just had no interest in showing this, because I think like also in terms of anti-fascist engagement, I mean, we don't really see it on screen, right? And if we see it, it's always like played out. But I think it's much more than what we have on a newspaper after G20.
Rahel, did you want to react?
It was just, I think you're right, Frédéric, to emphasize that they are so, I mean, they're in sync with each other. They're so sweet with each other, actually, trying to help each other in order to express themselves, bring out what they're really up to. And I mean, everyone who is has ever been engaged in political activism knows that there are a lot of conflicts, and probably those people, I mean, while doing what they do, they will have endured a lot of conflicts within the group and with others and so on. So it's an interesting choice to focus on those moments where this kind of, not only the urgency, but also the conflict is absent. I just thought it's a very, very interesting and important observation, and this feeling of timeliness or floating somewhere that could be that I mean that might be a part of it. This kind of this is the time when people take their time, the opposite of doing nothing, but also not the moment where they need to make a decision. So this kind of free space of open space, and what happens once you have created this kind of open space, that there is also this. It's not only about I don't know, having arguments, conflict, and things that you that are, I mean, marked by a lot of tensions. Actually, when everyone knows that, and it's an interesting choice to not focus on this, but show the other side, or another kind of atmosphere that is also something that I think you will observe and live through whenever you are part of this kind of activism and groups.
Yeah, but maybe it was also that we wanted to show it more in a metaphorical way, right? That there is a solidarity, that there's people all over the world that somehow have like the same topics on their plate and are discussing it in a somehow similar way, or have like same ideas on how the world could be or should be. I guess this kind of hope that is for me personally like so strongly there in this period of life during youth. I wanted also to transport with the film, right? Not the struggles, like not the internal struggles about, yeah, whatever, but like, no, I mean, there is like everywhere there is people. And what you said before, like in terms of, yeah, somehow it was not, so it wasn't Friedrichshain, or it could have been maybe also New York or wherever. So it's also an approach to like somehow have these particular characters and work on these particular figures, but like more in a universal way. It could like happen in every, or like not in every, but like in a lot of big cities around the world, these situations. And I think that's what we also tried with the film, to like transport this feeling.
Yeah, I mean, you're
like
touching
to know a bit
sorry.
more about the Chernikov framing. I mean, the framing by the novel of Chernikov, and this that was really, I mean, I have read the novel and other books by him, but I have never seen, I think, him talking in this, I mean, him personally in the talk show. Because I mean, the Chernikov, the bottom line is it's pointless. I mean, Chernikov is more like, at this point, at least in this interview, is more like the Bartleby generation, let's say. I mean, this kind of, I'd rather not to, or we should learn how to rather not to, in order to not somehow buying into the ideology of this kind of activism that in the end leads to nothing. I mean, this is what I take from this line in Chernikov, and I know that, I mean, there are different parts of his life, of course. I mean, would you think that I mean, about your choices and your political message here, that your protagonists contradict this idea of pointlessness, or is it something they are, I mean, I somehow thought it's something they are constantly discussing. Is it pointless? Is it not pointless? Are we doing, I mean, why are we doing this? Do we have to do it? Is it something that we can't even avoid doing, even if it might be pointless and so on? So this is what I took from this kind of what you could also see as a strong contradiction. Sheniko turning up and saying, we should learn that it's pointless, or this is my experience that everything is pointless. And then those kids who don't care about where it leads to, or who just think it's not that they are overly optimistic in terms of, we're going to change the world in 2 months, but
maybe we can let Jennifer answer. Carolina is not the only one who can speak about her work. How did you see it, Jennifer? Did you find also this question about pointlessness of political activism as something central?
Well, what I was thinking about was maybe the futility of utopias, and there seems like that what they, or I was thinking about what reading between the lines also of what their conversations, the content of their conversations, and that there's a couple of things that they're talking about. That one is how to exist within the system while maintaining some kind of a clear conscience about how you are either contributing to this, this system which does not provide, equity for everyone, or how to, how to bypass the system. And it made me think about not just other films about communes or communal living or utopias or something like this. I mean, there's a the popularity of Chloe Zhao's film Nomadland, is sort of, there's something similar about these conversations around in the States, like bypassing the system, living outside of the system. Or, I was thinking also when I was watching your film, Carolina, about this other, one of my most favorite fiction films, Marcy, Martha, May, Marlene. It's about a girl who escapes this kind of idyllic commune where it's, of course, like we eventually realize that it's actually just, there's, it's like a kind of a, young girl sort of sex farm or something, and maybe that feels like a kind of a reach from what the content of your film, but I was thinking about this aspirations towards utopias, that feels oftentimes pointless in a kind of Lord of the Flies way, and in the conversation, meaning that in the conversation, for instance, where all five of them are together, and it seems like they're sort of writing out a manifesto in a way for what their demands for the structure of the school or something like this. And I kept trying to, and this is entirely me as both a human and as a filmmaker. I kept trying to detect if there was someone dominating the conversation, and just thinking about oftentimes these systems or these groups, these conversations that are aimed towards a real equity, like it just eventually falls into a kind of a hierarchy, and oftentimes where there's like the tallest, cutest boy in the group is the one who's like, well, I have an idea, and the other boys are like, that's a good idea, and then the girls are like, hey, that wasn't my idea, and I'm being very binary here, because of course, like, I it's like a group of white youth, and maybe I don't know. It's also like just trying to read between the lines of the idea that within a utopia like this, there still is the potential for like individual human abuse or oppression. I mean, that was not in your film, but just in kind of reading between the lines and thinking about these ideologies and utopias, and that those systems also fall apart, because there still is a system. It seems like the only way to ever really bypass it is if you were truly a human who was raised in the wilderness by yourself, without any influence from anyone else. And so I think as another filmmaker who's deeply invested in the ideas and the images of young people and the aspirations of young people, I was reading between the lines and wondering, like, okay, where is this group? And it was something that Rahel was saying, like, they're very good to each other, but I was wondering, like, where could there be a moment, or where will there be a moment, because it seemed inevitable, where will there be a moment when the group falls apart, because there's been some sort of interpersonal tension around who knows what, that could be also related to that kind of the impulse of youth, I don't know. And that was and that's just me also as a narrative filmmaker, looking at the performers in your film and thinking of them as characters and not necessarily just as people. And of course, like, the last thing I'll say is, like, if anyone has ever seen any of my films, that I always like the something to unravel into a place where characters are kind of coping with interpersonal mistake making. And I was so happy to see even the footage at the beginning of the protest. I mean, this is kind of going back to something that we were talking about earlier, that even the footage of the protest was still from this very kind of curated observational place. And I think that right now, especially what's happening in the United States around all of the footage that came out of the January 6th raid of the Capitol, both sides, and it's actually, there's like 5 sides to the story. Everyone can look at the exact same clips and have a different take. There's nothing about that kind of, like, in the middle of the protest footage that is proof about whose side is correct. It's sort of astonishing that you can. So I think that, making that very, very clear decision to not show the action was so smart. And I think that exactly what you're saying, that the proof is in the audience's way, that they're kind of playing out the story as the characters are telling it.
Jennifer, I'd like to bring in the second film of the program, Museum Sleeps, and we'll come back, of course, to Carolina's film. There is a connection in the theme of youth and youth alienation of the world, and this is, I know, a topic that's very, very dear to you, Jennifer. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your impression of the politics of A Museum Sleeps. You just briefly talked about the subtexts and questions of class and backgrounds, and of course this you go to Paris and you're in a museum, and of course there's this question, where are we set, and this protagonist who is not part of the world he's interacting with. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your reactions to this constellation.
Sure. And yeah, I mean, the Museum Sleeps is definitely in kind of like my world, even as a maker, because it leans so far into the surreal. It leans so far into an internal logic. It leans so far into like a disregard to narrative conventions, like this kind of conventional setup and payoff. And it takes very lovely liberties with the dialogue, and with how the dialogue is, the awkwardness, or the stylistic dialogue. And I knew from the very beginning that beautiful shot of this girl and then it turns around, and it's this, in a way, it's like a little bit of a doppelganger kind of moment in that very first shot. And you sort of know, like, okay, this is not going to be, we're going to travel down a very particular kind of wormhole. And so you know, and it felt like it felt very much like using a kind of surrealism, or even using melodrama. You know, I feel like melodrama is such a delicate it's such a delicate place to explore youth, because young people are you know, can be very melodramatic, and our protagonist, you know, is so melodramatic. Like, my most favorite moment in the film, and there's so many beautiful ones, but is when he first goes into the museum and asks if anyone has seen this young woman, and the sort of docent, or the museum woman behind the counter, says no, the museum was closed yesterday, and he just, you know, falls apart, and she's like, no, no, no. You know, it's like, it's such a stylized moment, with no interest from that filmmaker to present something naturalistic or even believable. You know, it's not, but it's done in such a kind of deft way that we believe the fantasy that a museum worker would suggest going to the painting as a remedy for heartbreak. You know, it's like so great. And there's so many funny lines in that movie, like when he finally finds, or it's in a kind of a flashback, when or maybe when he finds Chloe again. It's hard, it's because the whole thing, the time and space really collapses in that movie in a really great way, and all kind of set to the rhythm of the piano tuner, which I really love, that we never come back to the piano tuner, and that's just fine. I think in other films that lean into the surreal, it can be very alienating and maybe confusing for an audience member if you say, like, yeah, but who was that woman with the children? Was that a sister? Was that a ex-lover? What happened to the piano tuner? I mean, the way this film is put together so deftly that you just have to remain in the present of that film, you know, which I appreciate. And there's this great line where Chloe says something like, I left, or the painting, that painting absorbed all my murmurs, or took all my murmurs. I mean, maybe it's a strange translation, but it, you know, that was so excellent. And yeah, so I just think that the use of surrealism and melodrama to talk about love and crushes and heartbreak and self-discovery, you know, was so cool. And the structure of that film, to make the structure of that film feel like it was theatrical and musical, rather than using the conventional language of film, also felt like really rebellious. You know, I mean, to just really step outside of the conventions of a narrative film is, you know, that feels like a risk, and I feel like it paid off in this with this film.
What do you think, Rahel? Do you agree?
It's interesting. I mean, I was thinking about how you curated those two films and how you wanted them to work together. And I mean, I think you also suggested we curated this, and you should watch them in the order of appearance, which I did. I think the move from this utterly, I mean, you were mentioning the concept of alienation here. I mean, this utterly alienated situation, and a situation where our protagonist says the life isn't good. There's the scene where when he explains to Chloe why he would have to leave. He says, "Life isn't good. I don't like the city. I have to break apart. I need to change. Be alone, break apart, need to change." And the move from this kind of surreal, but also in an almost old-fashioned way, existentialist setting, or the kind of quest for authenticity that you find in him, which I think is something that, and I mean, I would say it's the way the movie ends is somehow telling. So I mean, this kind of search for one's true self, the authentic self, the need to change that is somewhat disconnected from the world. I mean, I would say it leads to nowhere anyway. So my idea was that you created those two movies and wanted us to see them together because I mean, there is a kind of movement from this very narrow and somehow, I mean, beautifully done, and I mean, with all those beautiful tools that Jennifer described it, but it's also something like a very narrow perspective and a narrow kind of perception of the world that then somehow opens up when we're watching the second movie. So this was my idea of like what happened here, the kind of search for oneself, and then those the youth that is no longer looking for. I mean, there is still very much into the existentialist dimension of their politics. I mean, they are thinking about how, I mean, the one in Caroline's movie, they are thinking about how this affects their life. So they're still somehow self-centered in some way, but maybe in a good way, in the way that we should think about what's going wrong in the world as something that has an effect on us. And yeah, it's just
why did you say you think it leads nowhere? What do you mean by that? The this wish for change, you mean? Why does it lead nowhere? What do you think? What do you mean by
a wish
that?
for change that is only that is self-centered the way he is, I would say, or that is looking for the kind of break apart. I mean, the need to break apart in terms of I'm going to find something here. And he even, I mean, he tells her, I'm going to be back and I will love you even more. Or you might love me even more. And you wonder, I mean, what could this possibly be? I mean, what kind of treasure does he expect to find? It's also something, some kind of a cliche. I mean, this kind of youth alienation, quest for authenticity, looking for something that I can only develop once I'm apart from everyone else. I mean, the Walden Thoreau, whatever kind of framework.
Is it narcissistic?
I would say so.
Jennifer seems to agree.
Sorry.
Caroline, I'd like to ask you the question that is a bit inevitable at Critics Week. You were paired with another film. Your film was paired with another film, and you had no say in it. And I think filmmakers can be very protective of their own work when they put them into the world for the first time, especially how will it be perceived in which context. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your reactions to A Museum Sleeps and the pairing of the two movies.
Yeah, I think it's like two films that couldn't be more different as they are. But I felt, and of course, I mean, I was also like a bit, hey, am I going to like it or not, whatever. But what I really liked and where I think they really got into conversation or starting to talk to each other was, I guess, like this very free and, as Jennifer said, rebellious treatment of form, right? I mean, Camille does what she wants, and I think we also did I did what I wanted, not taking any convention on your shoulders and like, yeah, going somewhere there with it. And also in terms of how she depicts Paris and its surroundings, I could very much relate to, even if it's very different what she did compared to what we did. But I think the texture of the city, or the like Buchemont, the park, the texture that she, like these little small things in terms of sound, in terms of objects, the trees, the grass, but also in the city, like the camera positions and compositions that she found, and really like working with the texture, also image-wise, with the city. That was something what I could very much relate on, and like these small details that create a world, right? That looks, I mean, it looked also like a very different Paris, what we saw, compared to how Paris is normally depicted in films. And this is what I really loved. I mean, I think the whole story of the love story, I was a bit like, yeah, I mean, why I was, yeah, actually it would be super nice to talk to Camille about it. Why she somehow followed very stereotype, of course, exaggerated characters, but in terms of gender, like very stereotyped cliche roles that were, like, for me personally, very very disconnected from the style of the film, right? Like formally.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about bourgeoisie in this film, and I think there's something about it's a film. It's a question maybe also to you. How aware is this film? What do you think? How aware is the film about its own perspective and what it is depicting? Because we have this, I mean, we have different realms we are connecting to at the museum, but also the people in the end where the protagonist does not enter the house. So we do have different kinds of realms of living situations. Yeah, what would you say, Jennifer? How aware is the film about the perspective of the film and the perspective maybe of the protagonists?
Well, I think when I was, nodding my head so much when Rahel was saying, about this is like a narcissistic protagonist, I mean, and just listening to Carolina talk about this kind of these sort of typical gender roles, I think it's a curious thing to present a protagonist that sort of at the end of the day is like not very likable, and that we don't necessarily root for, because at the end he like doesn't, Chloe's like, I'm with someone else now, and I've changed. I mean, she just, but it isn't in this kind of typical like breakdown where she says, I waited for you, and what did you, it's also very, it's like a Samuel Beckett play or something like this at the end. And there's something that's very cool about, or from my perspective, both as a female filmmaker and as a, as a as a female in the world who's dealt with, my share of men who decided to go find themselves rather than, stay and work things out. It's he's kind of unlikable. I mean, there's not really a moment when we're rooting for him, and I think that even happens, when he shows up at the auto mechanic, and the guy lets him use the car, but he's also like, listen, if the car is not back in a couple of days, I'm going to report it missing. Like, we also understand that this is someone who's like, who is beholden, only to his own wants. And the fact that, Chloe at the end is not, she expresses disappointment, but he doesn't get the girl at the end. He loses her, and he's like there with a clock for a head. I mean, there's something that was really satisfying about following this character who's kind of unlikable, that you start rooting for, and then you realize that, that it's pointless to root for him. And then he kind of, it's like this open ending where the guy does not, he doesn't get the girl again. And the other two things I just didn't want to forget to point out was that, I'm so curious about the use of the aspect ratio in this film, because it was like 4:3. It's like this square. And I found I mean, I'm an educator too at a university here in Chicago. And there's a lot of young filmmakers who are returning to this 4:3. And the first time that I saw that, I asked this filmmaker, she shot it in 16:9, but then she title saved it. So then she was going to crop it to 4:3. And I said, oh, is that because of like 16 millimeter film or old analog technologies. And she said, no, it's because of Instagram. And I thought that, I mean, I don't know that that's what Camille was thinking about, but it's just something to note that, you know, was in this very particular kind of aspect ratio. And I watched Camille's film before I watched your film, Carolina, and I also loved in this film the perspective of the trees. You know, there's a couple of times when you get like the voiceover that's clearly coming from the trees. And so then when I was watching Carolina's film and you know, that first shot that I had mentioned already of the park, you know, I was thinking like, oh, I bet those trees have seen a lot of political unrest over the years that they have been trees in that park. So it was just in ways that I was able to kind of, you know, connect those films. It was through the way that nature was used in both, but in Camille's film I loved that at some point the trees are sort of the Greek chorus on some level. That was a very long answer. I apologize for you all being patient while I got through that all.
That's fine.
We love to listen to you. I want to mention, yeah, I mean, one thing is I really agree that the way that Paris is beautiful. I mean, the way Paris is depicted is beautiful, and also that there is some kind of similarity to how Friedrichshain Berlin is depicted and not depicted, not in the cliche kind of way. And I totally agree, of course, and I think Frédéric was even a bit astonished when I somehow had to admit that this guy goes on my nerves. I mean, it's really not something someone I would go for, and he goes on my nerves. And I think this is something we share. I mean, the kind of the gender plot here and this narcissistic plot and the kind of lonesome wolf looking for his true self, and then the woman has to wait and so on. I'm just not sure. I mean, this is not against Camille, not against the movie as such, but I'm not sure. I mean, I was waiting for the moment where this cliche would be deconstructed, where this cliche would be somehow where a subversive moment would enter. I mean, you also have this in some way brilliant, but also in some way, like I felt repulsed, the scene in the bar when Chloe and him, I mean, I don't know. So I was waiting for the moment where it would be deconstructed, be ironicized, be however, I mean, subverted. And I'm not sure whether the end, I mean, the fact that the whole enterprise is somehow a failure, he doesn't get the girl, she didn't wait, she didn't love him even more or wait for him to become even whatever more brilliant person, whether this is enough. And this also relates to the question of how does the world get in? So even if in terms of how Paris and Berlin Friedrichshain are present in the picture, even if talking about this luxurious kind of duration and time and the kind of bubble that is created even with respect to our protagonist in Friedrichshain, the bubble that is created here seems to be so much more oblivion of the world. I mean, it's not that, and Caroline, it's not that we should see like everything that goes wrong with the world in the picture. I mean, not going for this kind of you should have more social realism here and it's a bourgeois bubble, but it is the kind of bubble that is not even, I don't know, spelling out the kind of, I mean, some kind of tension, contradictions, self-undermining aspects of this bubble. It's not just that it's about, I mean, clearly about some Paris bourgeoisie. I mean, some way I don't know what you think, but I mean, somehow the group in Friedrichshain is also a privileged group. I mean, Jennifer was mentioning it, and there was this scene when on the roof they were thinking about, would we go for, I mean, might we end up as house owners ourselves and so on? When he says, yeah, I mean, somehow people might find themselves in the situation where they earn like 6,000 to 8,000 euros. And I was thinking, like, oh my God, I mean, that's really, I mean, how many people do you know who have like 6,000 to 8,000 euros a month? So it's clearly something, I mean, there is privilege in this group as well. I mean, not only like,
I guess like just a quick comment, I guess like this wage comment that was coming from the lack of knowing that there are not that many people earning that much money. But it's true, definitely it's true. I mean, it's like people who, like in terms of privilege, it's people in this country who get the highest education, school education, and can go to universities afterwards. And yeah, in terms of this, it's definitely like that. But yeah, maybe to defend them a bit, I mean, it's like they all come from families where there's, I mean, it's not, I mean, this is actually, maybe I shouldn't like say that because it's actually, it doesn't care for the film, but I think like for the process of creating, it was quite important because I think they all come from families where there is like a social and cultural capital, but not economical capital. Yeah. So no, they are like privileged, but yeah.
I know, I mean, that's the feeling I got from it. And I wasn't attacking it, I didn't want to attack them on this ground. What I actually meant is that even if here there's some privilege in some kind of bubble, and also bubble that you artificially created in terms of this is a bubble for reflection, and this is what I liked so much about it. And it's also like, okay, so this is how it has to be. I mean, I think
it's very discursive. I mean, the film puts this in plain sight. So you start
it's a bubble, and the Paris bubble is a bubble, whereas the Friedrichshain bubble is some kind of open space, I would say.
I think it's interesting to also incorporate the reactions we as spectators have to the films into the film, because I feel like A Museum Sleeps, a lot of your reaction is built by the film. You know what I mean? It's this bland protagonist who does not say much, does not actually have much of, I mean, what do we actually know about him? What do we know about his perspective and about where he stands? He's kind of an outsider, and we see that he kind of lives on the streets, but he looks very pretty. I mean, he looks, he doesn't look like he's been on the street long, or there's something off about him. And I think having this protagonist in the middle, and as far as I understand you, you're reacting like you wanting to shake him, or you wanting to, you're kind of annoyed by him, or there's some reaction you have. And I think this is something that the film produces as well. So I just wanted to bring in this this perspective that the film and its reaction are intertwined. There are a couple of questions, and one is related to this in our Telegram group. So I'd like to share a little bit of comments from our audience that has been listening to us. One was about the question of gender, and a user is saying, I agree to Caroline in the topic of gender relating to A Museum Sleeps. What is your attitude towards the male gaze in visual and also a narrative level? That's something you connect to, the question of gaze? Your microphone is off.
You shortly disappeared. No, of course, I mean, like gaze, and when you create images, you of course always like think about gazes and about images that leads us to certain gazes, right? And of course, like for our film, we had a very clear view on how to depict them, like apart from their gender, but like how to depict young people, right? And that we have like a big responsibility while doing that, right? And gaze, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think this is what actually Camille did quite well, like the gaze on him, right? Like the female gaze on Arnika was different in a more an emancipatory. Yeah, it was not this typical female gaze that we could expect by such an actor with this visage. Huh?
There's another question I'd like to relay, and there are a couple that are longer, but this one is quite short. Your reaction, all three of you, if you want to answer, about the dance scenes. In both films, there are dance scenes, and in a way, when you see those two films back to back, they seem almost related. What did it evoke in you?
Well, I could say, I mean, it's like I personally, as a filmmaker and a film viewer, love when there is a moment that suggests that there is synchronicity and harmony in something like the parallel world. So both of those scenes, the dancing scenes, that are about a sort of artful human expression, those really are about art and beauty and synchronicity. And you get to have a break from the, you know, from some parts of the film that can be heavy in both aspects. So in both films, you know, for me, I love when a film can break from the reality of the film itself and do it really successfully. So it's not a disruption. It's like a release, a moment of release that is about reminding an audience that in the midst of you know, mistake making and deep thought, that there is synchronicity and beauty and harmony, and that when humans make an effort to do things together, it's better together.
I mean, I just want to mention, I mean, the Paris bar dancing scene, I think I somehow felt repulsed by it in terms of gender roles, but on the other side, it's a really good scene. I mean, it's a really intense scene. Just remind you that there's no music in this scene. It's only the bartender who gives rhythm. And I mean, this is really intense, I have to say. I mean, it's just very well done in terms of how to create this, how to very effectively create such a dense and strong, I mean, dense situation, strong feelings. And I mean, what Frédéric says made me a bit, made me thinking whether, because I was asking whether there, I mean, I said that I was waiting for the moment of subversion here that would go beyond the cliche. And maybe what you said about our reaction could be part of this. I mean, it's not, it's obviously not. I mean, maybe it's contingent, and it's just a coincidence that the three of us somehow share the same reaction towards the boy. But maybe it's not, and maybe it's something that it is about this kind of narcissistic lonesome wolf. Let me find myself attitude that is depicted in a way that leads us not to, not to share the obvious or the cliched reaction of somehow admiring him. It's not only Chloe who ends up not admiring what he did and being somehow pragmatic about it. Even it's also not the kind of dramatic loss. It's just like, oh, I happen to have another boyfriend. So maybe there's something more subversive in it than I assumed. I'm not sure. What do you think?
There's something extremely static about him. When you, in the different situation he is in, he never seems to be the hero of the situation he is in. The things happen to him in a way. There's something. I mean, I'm not to judge it, but just to observe that it's quite contrary to the usual way you would depict a I don't know, coming of age or kind of youth searching for change and searching for his love or something. He's there in these situations, but he's not fighting for them in a way. It's quite bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that maybe Camille was also pointing more to depict the class, because I think this is what she did very well, and like to like read the whole love story within the class she's depicting. Yeah, I mean, maybe. But then on the other hand, then the question comes up, yeah, but who's Chloe then, right? And this is then again problematic. So yeah, I don't know. But it's a bit complicated because she's not with us. So yeah,
Really a
hope
pity
to.
she's not with us.
Yeah.
She has the only and the best excuse filmmakers have. She's working on her next film and she's shooting right now, which is why she couldn't be with us. I have a couple more questions from the audience. One is to Caroline about how do you feel about the talk on the roof about privileges? For me, it felt so sure that the movie already knows the system will change the attitude of all of them, a group of pupils, which seems to stand perfectly for privileged youth around the climate activist scene.
No, I see the scene very different. I see this scene as a very mature action, what they already did before, to like somehow claim a position or like talk about their own position, and then take into account that there's like a lot of people who have another position or like go another way and for example buy a flat, and that then they in the end that they have like this understanding, right? This understanding, I like that they are somehow like on the one hand dogmatic with their position, and it comes from energy of youth maybe, to be so free to have this position, but then they make this step and try to understand why other people take other decisions. And then in the end come to the clue that it's maybe not the people, but the system they're living in. And I guess this is like a movement that we did several times. And this particular scene is again for me this in relation to property, right? Because I think it's like a thought or like a movement of thought that many people don't do. I mean, I don't know if you understood, but yeah, if I was clear.
No, I think you were. I mean, the question of what does the film know about the protagonist? That, I mean, there might be something hidden in the images, whether it's your perspective on them or not. You know, something is built out of this. I think it's very interesting to have this scene on the roof, and to have them talk about properties where they're in a way in a position of overview of properties. So they're in a way, it's not exactly a mirror, but it's quite kind of related to, in Friedrichshain there are a lot of buildings that were made, penthouse buildings, where you would look over the city, and luxury apartments where it's about, you know, being over the city, and them talking about this, and them talking about the question of what does it mean to buy into a gentrifying moment in history, and being part of this. If you buy, it's maybe a also specific question in Berlin or in Germany, because in France people would discuss this completely different, because it's just you buy, you don't rent. It's just the obvious thing to do. But it's quite different in Germany to buy and to own an apartment is not something as common as it would be in other countries. Yeah, so I just think that placing them on this roof and being almost kind of close to the situation they could be once they have bought something, maybe it elicits this reaction. I have one very long comment here. I'm trying to summarize it, but I'll start by reading it to be true to it. So it's about FREIZEIT, or the opposite of doing nothing. I found very enlightening the use of the scene from Coole Wampe in the end, the film that they watched together on the laptop. Not only because Bertolt Brecht co-wrote the script of this film, but also because this specific scene about Brazilian coffee at the train was the only scene Brecht directed on the movie. And as Brecht was also a poet, in that sense, I would like to ask, could we think about a new German wave of films that the gentrification in Berlin, which invites us to discuss politics through a kind of poetic audiovisual essay? I could not help to also think of Muito Romantico by Melissa Dulios and Gustavo Jahn, or Oh Boy by Jan Ole Gerster. Do these relations also make sense to you? Do these directors know each other? And thank you for your film, Caroline. Never thought about the malicious old guys offering fire at the station, but it also annoys me. Caroline?
Yeah, Melissa and Gustavo's film I know, and as they depicted the changing of their neighborhood through their like out of the window, I can very much, like in terms of these images, I can relate to it. And oh boy, I never saw.
There's another question that relates to what Jennifer said earlier about the low diversity in your film, Caroline. Specifically for a city like Berlin, the fact that they seem to be all without any kind of migration background, and Berlin is full of a great diversity of backgrounds. Any comment on that?
Yeah, I think this was also something that we discussed, like in the team, but also with the teenagers. But this came actually through the process. I mean, we had like a big meeting with like a lot of teenagers about 5 months before we started this working together period. And there were many people, but in the end, it was up to them to decide if they want to go in this somehow quite work-intensive project, right? And yeah, I mean, actually, I was wondering also, no, but not wondering. I mean, like, for me, it felt then natural because I had the feeling, okay, I want something from them. And now I take the people who are up to going on this voyage with us, right, with me. And it felt for me somehow very unnatural to like say, no, there's like this person missing whose parents are from Turkey or whatever, right? So I think like this kind of typecasting in terms of, yeah, I don't know, that would have not felt organic in the whole process. But it's true. I mean, it's sad.
I'd like to come to one last aspect of this talking style, and you're free, of course, to react to whatever the others have said so far. The question of cinema as a critique of cinema. and the relationship of the films to other films. One comment here came and thought of other connections that were the connections of the spectator, but you might have different ones. Caroline, can you relate to the idea of cinema as a critique of cinema?
Yeah, definitely. I think like our film stylistically, formally is a critique of a 3-act structure, right? Yeah, but maybe also Jennifer has something to add.
Well, I think both of the films sort of defy expectation, and I think that both films break from a convention, and that they're both like self-reflexive in that way. They're both films that know their films, and I think Carolina's film does that even before we get to the end, where there is like the kind of film within the film. And I was also thinking about the way that the work of art, the painting, is used in Camille's film, and then that thinking about the audience for Carolina's film, and just the idea that cinema is art. And I feel like sometimes I sound so naive when I say that in these very dark times that art and culture will save us. Right? Do you think that we still, I mean, just at coming to the end of Berlin's Critics Week, we turn to something like film for answers that will stabilize our real lives. And so in that regard, I think that both of the films have a real sense of themselves, and a real sense of self-reflection, and a real sense of cinema as a kind of anecdote, or antidote, not an anecdote, an antidote.
Rahel, you published also a book on the term of critique. Do you think that the term critique can be helpful to look at cinema as a critique?
Sorry, I didn't. Yes, of course. I mean, and mostly, I mean, not only in terms of the content, but of course in terms of how they reflect and somewhat imminently criticize other movies. I mean, it's not only with the most obvious cases where film is full of citations. I don't see this in Caroline's movies. I mean, there's the film in the film, but it's not like something where a film historian would be needed in order to decipher all those citations. But at the same time, of course, I mean, it's a statement, and as a statement, a reaction to other ways in which it could have been done and has been done, and as such, this critique.
I think this is very beautiful what you just said, Rahel, because I think this was very important to me, to not make a film that is not accessible. I mean, there was at a certain point, there was a concern if it's like a too German film, as it's referring so much to different points in German history. But on the other hand, I had the feeling, no, but it tries to like understand history as past, present, and future, right? And this is also like, yeah, something that is not connected to a nation. So, yeah.
Jennifer, did you think of other films watching these two?
Well, like I said, in watching Carolina's film, I was just thinking about, the all of the think pieces and the conversations around, Nomadland, that current film that's also about living outside of the culture. And with this is maybe like a very bad example, but when I was watching Camille's film, I was thinking about its relation to male characters in the early films of Wes Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
Like and very, very coincidentally, last night Rushmore was on, you know, and there's something about the kind of Max Fisher character in Rushmore who's just so, you know, on a mission, such a self-centered mission, you know, or even one of the characters in, or maybe all the sort of lots of the male characters in Bottle Rocket. And I don't know why that in particular just struck me, and maybe those are not good examples, but my intuition went to you know, to those different films.
Carolina, do you feel connected to other filmmakers, or is there something like a family of films, or people who think about film who you feel connected to? Is there something like that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, many, right? I mean, there's people like next to me that I know and others that I don't know, but of course, like Agnes Varda and Chantal Akerman, for example, are like women that I really adore for what they did. And in my close surroundings, I mean, there's, for example, Anna-Sophie Hartmann or Philipp Fröhlich and Lubcio Temekowski, Markus Krupp. And I mean, of course, I also know Julian Radelmeier or Stefan Butzmühlen and Christina Dies. So yeah, I guess there's like these friends, and then there's like other filmmakers that are important for my own work. Yeah. But it's a bit like, oh God, yeah. I mean, now I already like counted up names, and I think I don't like it. And I'm a bit like, yeah, no, what did I just say?
Why did you start?
Yeah. I mean, like with Agnes Varda and Chantal Akerman, sure. But I mean, like, there's plenty of filmmaker friends here in the city, but also all over the world that I'm very close with, and that I'm in conversation with, right? Yeah. What we want from cinema.
Would that be an exchange? Would the exchange with other filmmakers inform your work?
Inform?
Yeah, in a way, does it influence? Does it nourish your work?
Of course. I mean, like going together to the cinema and discussing films afterwards. This is quite an important thing what we do when we don't shoot, right, or edit. I mean, this is the essential thing. And of course, like also then put it in relation to your own work. Yeah. And what you're interested in. Sure.
Talking style. Okay. Well, thank you very much for this talk about what cinema can mean, and what stylistic choices inform about the world around us and the filmmakers. It's all about what Critics Week is about, and I hope you enjoyed this week. You can still click on a link tonight and watch it for 24 hours. So if you want to, don't miss the chance, and hopefully see you all in the cinemas in Berlin in June. We hope we'll be there safe and sound. Thank you very much, Carolina and Jennifer and Rahel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.